We turn now to the 2024 race. After a nearly flawless convention in Chicago, Democrats are riding high. The energy and excitement at a level we haven't seen since Barack Obama first won the party's nomination nearly 2 decades ago. For Kamala Harris, that has translated into hundreds of millions of dollars in campaign donations, a flood of volunteers, and a boost in the polls. As Donald Trump watches his lead evaporate, both nationally and in the key battleground states, Politico reports he is, quote, finally recognizing he's at risk of losing the election unless he makes some changes. Well, there's no evidence of big changes coming from Trump, although after watching Harris's convention speech, he declared his administration would be, quote, great for women and their reproductive rights. That's quite a statement for a president who has also claimed credit for the repeal of Roe v. Wade. Trump may be struggling and Harris may be surging, but if we've learned anything this summer, it's that momentum can be fleeting, and virtually every presidential candidate gets a convention bounce, even the losers. Remember Michael Dukakis? After the 1988 Democratic Convention in Atlanta, he had a 17-point lead over George H.W. Bush in the Gallup poll. And then he went on to lose in an electoral landslide greater than any we have seen since. Trump has been trying to portray Kamala Harris as a left-wing radical. But so far, anyway, that hasn't stuck. And in Chicago, Harris's convention sounded a decidedly moderate tone. In her speech, Harris promised to be tough on crime, tough on the border, tough on Iran and China. And far from supporting the arms embargo many on the left had demanded, she promised to defend Israel. There was no talk of taking on big corporations or the ultra-wealthy, no promises of Medicare for all. Gone were many of the progressive positions Kamala Harris herself took when she launched her first campaign to be the Democratic presidential nominee some 5 years ago. The Kamala Harris on the stage in Chicago seemed more eager to appeal to moderates and disaffected Republicans than the party's liberal activists. We'll see what Republicans have to say about all that shortly. But what about progressives in her own party? What do they think? There is nobody better to ask than our next guest, Senator Bernie Sanders. Senator Sanders, welcome to This Week. Before we get to the convention and all that, I want to ask you about the news overnight out of Israel. Do these attacks from Hezbollah underscore that Israel is still very much under threat?
Well, I think clearly we have a very volatile situation in the Middle East. We have had that for a long time now. The good news is it appears that both Hezbollah and Israel are trying to de-escalate. I hope that happens, and I hope we reach a ceasefire with Hamas, Israel and Hamas, as soon as possible.
All right, let me ask you about the convention. What was your take on the messaging from Kamala Harris in Chicago?
Well, I think the energy coming out of that convention was very high. I think it's going to be a rough campaign. I think the vice president now has a very good chance to win it. She's certainly going to win the popular vote by millions of votes, and I think she has a great chance to win many of the battleground states, and I intend to do everything that I can to see that she wins. My own guess is, Jonathan, that I think people are growing tired and fatigued with Trump's consistent and outrageous lies. And I think no matter what people may think of Kamala Harris, I think they want stability in the White House. They want somebody who they can trust. And I think they understand that is not the person that Donald Trump is.
I want to play for you a few lines from her speech about her role, what her role would be as commander-in-chief. Take a listen.
As Commander-in-Chief, I will ensure America always has the strongest, most lethal fighting force in the world. I will always stand up for Israel's right to defend itself, and I will always ensure Israel has the ability to defend itself. I will never hesitate to take whatever action is necessary to defend our forces and our interests against Iran and Iran-backed terrorists.
Now, I've been covering you for a long time. I've heard you talk about the need to cut the Pentagon's budget. Obviously, you've been an advocate of the arms embargo.
Well, let me just say, Jonathan,
Yeah.
in all due respect, the United States is now spending more than the next 10 nations combined on defense. I agree with the Vice President. We want the strongest defense in the world. But I do think enough is enough. You're seeing military contractors' profits soaring, and I think we can have the strongest defense in the world without spending $1 trillion a year.
But what about the tone she struck there, though, emphasizing the need to have the most lethal force, talking about being willing to take on Iran, and vowing to give Israel whatever it needs to defend itself?
Well, look, what I happen to believe, and what I try to point out, I try to make in my remarks, is that we have a nation today where 60% of our people are living paycheck to paycheck at a time when we have more income and wealth inequality than we have ever had in the history of this country. So I happen to believe it's important that we end the embarrassment of having the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth. That's why I'm delighted that she is talking about making the child tax credit, which lowered childhood poverty by 40% as a result of the American Rescue Plan, permanent. I happen to believe, and I hope she will support, expanding Social Security by lifting the cap on taxable income so we can increase Social Security benefits. I hope we can move toward expanding Medicare to cover hearing, dental, and vision. These are popular ideas. Every poll that's out there say that is exactly what the American people want. The American people are sick and tired of seeing the people on top doing phenomenally well while they are struggling. And I think this is something that the Vice President understands.
As you know, uncommitted delegates and other progressives have been demanding a pro-Palestinian speaker get a slot at the convention, and convention organizers refused. Was that a mistake?
Well, I happen to think, and my views in this area are very different from President Biden's views. I happen to think that we should not be giving another nickel to Netanyahu's right-wing extremist government. They certainly had a right to defend themselves against the atrocious Hamas attack. They never had the right, do not have the right, to go to war against the entire Palestinian people, kill 40,000, injure 80,000, and destroy the healthcare system, the educational system, and the civilian infrastructure. What's going on and lead to the starvation of thousands and thousands of children. American taxpayer dollars should not go to starve children in Gaza. That is my view. Others may disagree with me.
You see any daylight between Biden's view on this and Kamala Harris's view?
Well, I hope so. I think, in all fairness to the Vice President, she's been the candidate for all of 1 month, and it's been a hell of a month. You have to organize a convention, select the vice presidential campaign, get out on the campaign trail. So they are still working through their policies. But I think at the end of the day, I hope very much that the conclusion that will be reached is that Netanyahu and his right-wing extremist government, which has received tens of billions of dollars of aid from the U.S., should not continue to receive that aid unless there is a radical change in their policies to the people, to the Palestinian people in Gaza and in the West Bank, by the way.
And on immigration, when Harris ran for the Democratic nomination against you and others in 2020, she said she favored decriminalizing illegal border crossing. She even suggested she would be in favor of abolishing ICE. Now, of course, she's taking, at least rhetorically, a much tougher line on border security. Take a look at this, one of her very first ads as the presidential nominee.
Kamala Harris has spent decades fighting violent crime. As a border state prosecutor, she took on drug cartels and jailed gang members for smuggling weapons and drugs across the border. As vice president, she backed the toughest border control bill in decades. And as president, she will hire thousands more border agents and crack down on fentanyl and human trafficking. Fixing the border is tough. So is Kamala Harris.
What do you make of her transformation on this issue?
Well, I don't think it's a question of transformation. We have a crisis at the border. We've got to make sure that fentanyl does not get into this country. We have to crack down on illegal immigration. But what we need is comprehensive immigration reform. I mean, you got God knows how many young people in this country as a result of DACA who deserve to gain citizenship. We need skilled workers, and we need workers in this country. A lot of labor shortages all over America where immigrants can play an important role. So keeping people from illegally entering the country obviously is the right thing to do. But we need comprehensive immigration reform, and I suspect that is what the vice president supports.
But if you take a look at that ad, one thing that I found striking is if you look, and I think we have the images here, there are at least 3 points in that ad that show the border wall, Donald Trump's border wall. Is it now the position of the Democrats that they favored the border wall?
Well, you can ask the Harris campaign about that ad. That's the first that I've seen it. Bottom line is I think there's wide recognition in this country, and we've had some success. I think the number of illegal immigrants coming in recently has gone down substantially. That is a major issue, and we've got to continue to do that. But at the end of the day, what we need is comprehensive immigration reform.
But the immigration, and you said it wasn't a transformation, there's clearly a change in emphasis on it. She is also, in her first campaign, she supported Medicare for all, like you. She supported a ban on fracking and offshore oil drilling. These are clearly new positions now that she's taken.
Jonathan,
why is that?
Let me just say this.
Yeah.
You go out and you do a poll, as I have done, and you ask the American people whether or not health care is a human right and whether we should do what every other major country on earth does and guarantee health care to all of our people, the answer is yes. Should we be spending twice as much per capita on health care, despite 85 million people being uninsured or underinsured? Most American people understand the system is broken.
Yeah.
So Kamala Harris and I have a disagreement. I do believe in Medicare for all. I think the current system is dysfunctional and broken. She has a different point of view. But right now, Kamala Harris is running against Donald Trump. And Donald Trump's position on all of these issues are virtually extremely right-wing, pro-insurance company. He wants to end the Affordable Care Act, throw millions of people off of the health care that they have. So I think when you look at her positions versus Trump, the issue is clearly day and night. Her positions are far, far more superior.
All right, Senator Bernie Sanders, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.